in '68. I had plans of going to Grambling or Southern University in Louisiana. I came out here with my sister. She was going to Southern Cal. And after I'd come out, I checked out the program for veterans at UCLA, and I ended up enrolling at UCLA. And at the same time, I was meeting a lot of brothers and sisters who were involved in the movement, and eventually I became involved.
Why did you get involved with the Panthers? Just
Well,
from the brothers and sisters that you met?
No, it's kind of a long story. You know, going back to the background, I come from that old separate but equal doctrine in the South. You know, the school on this side of the tracks, segregated facilities everywhere, and I've been seeing racism, face to face all my life. In Vietnam, I also became awakened to a lot of things that I wasn't aware of. After coming from Vietnam and trying to enroll in the college in Los Angeles, I think really did the trick in making me aware as to exactly what was happening. Seeing the helicopters fly over Watts at night with the searchlights reminded me of when I was in Pleiku, Vietnam. Some parts of Vietnam when we used to patrol at night, being stopped by the LAPD numerous times, only because I was just traveling through that part of town and being harassed, seeing the harassment all around, the problems that were going on in the communities in the country.
You said you got awakened to a lot of things in Vietnam, like what?
The first thing that really had an impact that I can remember right off the top of my head was the Vietnamese soldiers had passed out a lot of leaflets. Not passed them out, they were everywhere. We were on patrol one day, and I hadn't been there for about maybe 2 weeks. And on the leaflets, they were talking, it was a lot of propaganda, communist propaganda. And a lot of the statements that they had on the leaflets were true. There's things like, "We never call you nigger," "Why are you fighting us?" And
this is the North Vietnamese?
Right. It was a lot of propaganda, right? And I was...
some of it made sense, huh?
Yeah, a lot of it made sense. And even though that's not the thing that really did, it opened my eyes, it started me to questioning things more, because I hadn't really questioned the war. I was American. I was just over there doing my duty for my country, And it was a lot of things that really made me see that how much I was programmed and confused about this whole war, to the point that I realized at a certain point that I was fighting people who were in the same situation that I was and my people were. And from that, I began to do more studying. And of course, Malcolm had already had an influence on me in my younger age, and I didn't know that much about that, but quite a few things. When Martin Luther King got killed, I was sitting on a bunker in North. In fact, I got wounded for the second time a few days before then. And I was still out there in the bushes, when we got the word on, Radio Free Europe or whatever it was, that we got the word on that Martin Luther King had been assassinated. All these things had a hell of an impact.
You're decorated Vietnam vet too, aren't you?
Well, yeah, I received
awards or whatever.
Right, 2 Purple Hearts, 2 Brown Stars, a recommendation for a Silver Star, Soldier's Medal, Commendation, Air Medals, all quite a few.
So you came back to Los Angeles, enrolled in UCLA.
Yes.
Became a Panther leader, I guess.
Well, later on, after Bunchy Carter, who was the ranking member of the organization in Los Angeles, was assassinated at UCLA, I succeeded him.
Mm-hmm.
But prior to then, I was more of a community worker, because I was, first of all, a college student, trying to go through college. And in the free time, I would work in the community. We were trying to initiate free clothing, free breakfast, all during that period, and it was real hard.
How did you set up these free clothing and breakfast programs?
Well, we would get a lot of donations, people who wanted to help. First, it started that from educational standpoint, and after people would go through these educational meetings and sessions, then you would see a more of a giving kind of attitude. So we ran across a lot of people who had a lot of things that they just were sitting on. So when they would give them to us, we would create. We had the Black House, the Coffee House on 103rd Street in Watts. We had different locations that we would try to disseminate these materials out into the community. At the same time, we were conducting economic education classes, political education classes, to try to show people in the community how they could survive better by through frugality, through budgeting themselves better, through knowing how to shop, knowing that this guy here in Watts charged you $12 for a pair of shoes, and whereas you can go to Beverly Hills and get those same pair of shoes for $6. Things like this we would show, and people would become more educated and act accordingly. As a result, the local merchants in the black areas or ghetto areas became mad at us for exposing this exploitation, and they in turn would cry to the local police departments, and they would cause them to, come down on us more harder. And there was no guns or nothing involved. It was basic education.
So when did you find with your affiliation with the Panthers that you started to get harassed more by the police?
Like I said earlier, I was constantly stopped and harassed, grabbed the car, and they shook, pat search, and sometimes we would have women and children in the car, and they would be treated the same. And so the question kept coming up in my mind as to why, we were being met with so much harassment and brutality. And that only served to sharpen the contradiction and expose to me and other younger Panthers around, our community workers, that we must have been doing something right, because we knew we weren't doing anything wrong, but yet we were still being attacked.
Did you feel at that time that that the police had surveillance on you, besides harassment, that they were keeping notes on what you were doing, and which has come out in this FBI COINTELPRO program?
Yeah, but I didn't realize it at that time. I had no idea that they considered us so much that they would waste so much money and time from their agencies such as the FBI and the CIA. A lot of people talk about, COINTELPRO is pretty well talked about nowadays, but what's not exposed is Operation Chaos. See, at the same time, the CIA had an operation called Chaos. It was codenamed Chaos, which was very similar to COINTELPRO. So we were being attacked on some pretty strong point, from some pretty strong quarters. In fact, the same operations that they leveled against us were very similar to the operations that they leveled against governments or foreign governments that they want to overthrow, such as the Allende government in Chile and the Lumumba. I mean, all throughout that history, when the CIA or FBI began, these kind of maneuvers.
So you're just close to home, domestic type problem, as they probably labeled you.
Right.
And then there was a murder in Santa Monica.
Yes.
All right. What are your comments on the murder? Obviously you say you didn't do it, is that right?
Right. See, the murder took place in December of 1968. December of 1968, I had been here for about 2 months in California. Yeah, in Los Angeles. And was real green so far as getting around. Los Angeles is a big city. I didn't know my way around. But during that time, I was sent up to Oakland, asked to go up to Oakland to become more familiarized with the party's function, because I was working pretty consistently with the Panther Party's programs, social programs in the community. And so Bunchy Carter asked me to go up, and so I went up. And I was in Oakland during that whole period. when the murder took place. About 2 years later, I was indicted for that murder. And it was the first time I had ever heard anything of a murder in Santa Monica.
So there was witnesses that testified in your trial that you were in San Francisco. Who were those folks?
Well, first, Kathleen Cleaver came from Algiers in Africa to testify. Shirley Hewitt came from Oakland. Linda, a sister named Linda Red, testified. She was from Los Angeles. The brother who was in charge of the Black Student Union at UCLA testified. My sister and family members testified. I had an eyewitness expert. I had quite a few witnesses testify. But I didn't know at the time that the FBI had surveillance records of this, and also electronic surveillance, in which they had telephonic conversations of me talking from Oakland to Los Angeles during this period. So we have enough information and evidence to corroborate my alibi, and that doesn't seem to be the problem right now.
So in the trial, how, if you had these witnesses that testify that you're in San Francisco, how then could you be convicted? What was the...
Well, you had to look at what the party was going through at the time, the Panther Party. It was at the crux of the attack of COINTELPRO and Chaos by, the FBI and CIA. Hoover was still living. He had declared that we were the greatest threat to the internal security of the United States. They had succeeded in planting evil seeds of mistrust, of dissension, of spreading gossip and rumors that were not true, causing quite a bit of consternation between members of the organization who were very close to each other. So this is the time when which is referred to as the split in the Black Panther Party. This is also the time that I have to go to trial, right? So it's hard for me to try to communicate from county jail, and I was always kept in a hole and almost in an incommunicado status. The two other members of the organization who knew my whereabouts during that time, because of the paranoia, the fear, and the basic distrust that has been caused by these.
In county jail, you were kept in the hole?
Yeah, I had been kept in the hole consistently from the time of my arrest until 1978, when I was released. Right, when I was released here in San Quentin to the mainland. Right, I had never been out of the hole.
Okay, wait. When did you come here to San Quentin once again?
In 72.
72.
Yeah.
What was the justification for putting you in the hole?
Well, first it was said that I was too notorious. Notoriety. Notoriety. That's what they put on the forms that they used to justify. But I attacked that in federal court, and we're due to go to trial on it in March of next year.
That's on them putting you in the hole. What can you gain?
For so many years, and it was not justified. They knew that it wasn't justified. It was basically because of political reasons. And you have people who come in from the Ku Klux Klan, from the John Birch Society, from all different kind of organizations who are not treated the way I was treated.
Now, you're serving a life sentence, is that right?
Yes.
Now, you're taking the fact that they put you in the hole for some 8 years,
right,
taking it to federal court. Now, what can you gain out of that?
Well, first of all, during those 8 years, seemed like each year the prison administration would have to come up with some pretext to justify maintaining me in that status, in that whole status. Throughout those years, I was accused of everything from child kidnapping, holding people hostage, assaulting prison staff. I mean, all kind of hideous kind of crimes that you could think of. I want these things aired out in open court. They're not true. I was accused of of being a member of prison gangs, which has never been true. I've been accused of a lot of things that's not true. Also, what's fundamental to all this is that the FBI did not discontinue their program against me. It carried right over into
The trial?
right on into prison. Whereas usually, such as I'll give you Rap Brown, for instance. When Rap was busted, he was taken off the active index files of the FBI. And this has been usually the case with everyone. You know, you were in prison, you know, you were neutralized, like they say. This didn't happen to me. I didn't find this out until I filed the suit in '75, and we got documents. And so far as I know, I'm still on an active index file, and I've been in prison almost 12 years. So COINTELPRO followed me in prison. The FBI was sending teletypes to the warden and local administrators concerning my status in prison. One dealt with, am I still in the hole? So all this goes to indicate and strengthen my position, which I've been saying all along, that they knew I'm not guilty. They've been knowing all along. But being in the hole is almost impossible for you to fight and expose the truth that you have been railroaded. You're faced with murders every day, all kind of racial madness, all kind of name calling, all kind of attacks from the guards because they look upon you as animals, especially if you're in the hole, and you're in the hole in San Quentin and Folsom. To, you know, on top of that, you're surely treated as animals, and it's it's hard. So it wasn't until I was released from the hole in '78 when I was able to really attack these lies, of my conviction. And that's why you've been hearing for the past 4 or 5 years about the case, because I've never given up. I'm not going to give up, But I figured that they wanted me to lay down or break me during those years in the hole.
There was a person who testified against you. I guess he was also a Panther member, Julius Butler.
Yes.
What was your association with him?
Well, Julius Butler worked for the Los Angeles Sheriff's Department. He was a deputy sheriff for quite some time. I don't know if he ever was a Panther per se, because he joined the party, from what I understand, under Bunch's administration, Bunchy Carter's, and I didn't. I was never able to check to see if that was legitimate, but in hindsight, I don't think it was. Looking back now, because it's clear that Julio was assigned to infiltrate the Black Panther Party and cause disturbance and problems.
Was he the main tool in convicting you, Julius Butler? Was he the...
Well, the main tool in my conviction, and you have to also keep in mind, the murder conviction was only one. I was also convicted of 2 other cases, and I'm also wanted right now in Alabama, in a place that I've never even heard of. So I say all this to say that the main provocateur, or the main element in my problems with the courts and here in this country has been the FBI and their fear or their paranoia or their fascist tactics in trying to neutralize a movement that they didn't like. Now, Julio Butler played a prominent role in that he lied and said that he had knowledge of me in relation to this murder. He also lied on the stand that he never worked with the FBI, he never talked to anyone, and all these things have been pretty well publicized. Now that we have documents of him reporting to the FBI almost on a daily basis, we have 33 actual documents which shows his contact with the FBI prior and up to and beyond the murder trial itself. So the question comes up, why did he lie? Why did the FBI lie? Why did they lie about the surveillance records they had on me in Oakland? Why did they destroy the files that they had of me talking on the phone, telephonic surveillance? all these things didn't come out in trial. We didn't know about it. I was under a lot of pressure. My wife had just gotten murdered. She was just murdered in '71. I went to trial shortly thereafter. I had just undergone a long ordeal throughout the shootout trial. I was also being charged with numerous assaults out of Los Angeles County because of the what's called jail fights. We would be jumped on a lot by the Los Angeles Deputy Sheriff's Department. I was also accused of all kind of wild, crazy stuff that nobody talks about anymore. But I'm trying to paint a picture to show you the frame of mind I was in during that time when they took me to trial for this murder. It was very, very difficult. The Panthers were being destroyed. It was all kind of paranoia. I couldn't communicate with anyone, and everybody was worried. They had heard this, they had heard that. The FBI had spread all kind of lies and rumors about. So it was a real difficult time.
How about the trial itself? Could you paint a picture of
the trial? The trial itself seemed to me that we had won it, even though we didn't have the information that we have now. Johnny Cochran was my attorney, and he was pretty effective in exposing the truth about the lies that were being told. For instance, on one hand, you had a so-called eyewitness putting me near the scene of the crime, saying that the person that they had seen, who they said was me, was clean-shaven, right? And they painted a picture, made a composite drawing of a guy who was clean-shaven, you know, and really didn't look anything like me. Julio Butler, on the other hand, who's also a prosecution witness, testified that during the night of the murder, that I was never clean-shaven. He always seen me with this, what you see me with now. Now, all this is lies, you know. I'm not even around. I'm in Oakland. But this is just to show you some of the contradictions that came up. But so far as eyewitness, I think the major one, or one of the major ones that came up was the one with the guy who was shot. He had identified another guy something like a few months after the murder had occurred. And this was back in 68 or 69, before my name ever even came up. When my name was brought into the picture some 2 years later, this guy said that, oh, this is him, right? And when he was asked, well, are you positive? Are you sure? Have you identified anyone else? He said, no, I've never identified anyone, and this is the guy. And it was all strange. The whole lineup, the whole makeup, all of that whole thing was very questionable.
So this gentleman identified someone else in '69.
Right, a few months, right.
And then later in '72.
Yeah, a few years later, he pointed me out in a book that strongly suggested that I should be the one that he should pick out. Now, this is being litigated also because of the unconstitutionality of that process.
There were two gentlemen shot at UCLA, or not UCLA, in Chicago, two Panthers.
Fred Hampton and Mark Clark.
4 days after that, there was an assault on your house. Tell us about that.
Yes, that was in December of 1969. J. Edgar Hoover had sent out an order throughout the country that he wanted all Panthers chapters neutralized. He wanted us just wiped off the streets. So it was a nationwide conspiracy against the Panther Party. And they attacked our offices in Chicago first. But really, they attacked the offices in Seattle, I think Des Moines, Iowa. But the one about Chicago, since Fred was killed, the one in Des Moines, they just blew the whole office up with dynamite. And they would do this a lot through the little right-wing organizations that they would manipulate and use, such as the Klan or the Minutemen. In Los Angeles, they would use the Gusanos a lot, the anti-Castro Cubans. to attack us in Los Angeles, or they would try to manipulate the non-antagonistic contradiction between the US organizations and the Panthers. So what happened in December of '69 was 4 days after the attack in Chicago, we were attacked in Los Angeles. To give you some background, the Los Angeles Police Department had surrounded our offices on 41st and Central in November, about 2 weeks prior to then. And we also had been informed from people who were working in the Los Angeles Police Department and people who were around them that they would be attacking us, that they had heard rumors to this effect, and we were trying to figure out, what was happening. So when the police came, they came about 3 or 4 in the morning, and they conducted a sneak attack against our offices. I wasn't there. I was at our community center on 55th off of Broadway. 3 locations were attacked that morning, and it just so happened at the one at Central, the brothers who were there heard them coming and looked and saw some white guys dressed with Pendleton shirts. I mean, it didn't look like any law enforcement. And so they reacted, thinking that it was some right-wing organizations trying to murder the Panthers. And so a shootout ensued. It lasted for about 4 or 5 hours. During the 4 or 5 hours of that shootout, the police department, and working in cahoots with the Naval Department of the Army Intelligence, brought helicopters, armored vehicles, and all kind of military equipment to destroy the Panthers who were there in the office. It wasn't until the community got together, South Central Los Angeles black community, and gathered about 2 blocks down from where the police had cordoned off the area, and demanded that the police allow them to meet with the Panthers to talk to us.
This all happened at 3 o'clock in the morning?
No, by this time it was about 7 or 8. But it was still a stalemate type situation. There was thousands and thousands of rounds fired. But we had foreseen, the problem of police just legally coming and killing people, kicking their doors down. So I had taken precautions and had all of the walls sandbagged. We put sand in between the partitions in the walls, and it was a good thing we did, because if it wouldn't have been for that, every Panther in there would have been torn to pieces. The helicopter also dropped dynamite on the roof of the building, and it wouldn't be for the fortifications we had made there, that would have been a total disaster, because the dynamite would have totally blown the building apart. So eventually the community demanded that they try to resolve the situation. And so when the Panthers saw that the community was there, they submitted. If the community say stop, okay, we'll stop. But we're not going to give up to any murderous pack of wild animals that come at 3 o'clock in the morning with no legal basis whatsoever, because in the trial that came after that, it was proven that they were in the wrong and we weren't. So, but nothing was done to them. They wasn't charged with any kind of assault against us. So we just beat that case, so to speak. Even though I wasn't there, I was one of the only ones that was convicted out of that trial. And so they just convicted me for possessing illegal weapons. That's one of my convictions today.
In your murder trial, I think it was found out that one of your attorneys was an informant to the FBI, is that right?
No. During the murder trial, we learned later on through the Freedom of Information Act that we had gotten our documents from the FBI. It reflected that there were quite a few informers around during that time. One was working for Attorney Johnny Cochran in his office. Johnny Cochran and I have talked extensively about this and trying to get to the bottom of this, but the FBI has not been forthcoming with any more information. And this goes right into the fundamental rights of man, or rights of the people in this society when going to trial, that you're never supposed to violate a person's space with his attorney, his privacy with his attorney. This was violated not only through that example I just gave, but through other examples which we now have evidence of, such as that they had an agent right in the county jail with me. They had two other agents who were masquerading as my defense committee, working with my defense committee, and there's possible others that we haven't been able to get any more information on.
Okay, recently, I guess it was last year, your attorneys filed for a new trial because of the information they got. What's the status on that?
Well, it was proud to. When I finally made it out this hole, I was able to get into my conviction more, and that was in '78. We began the habeas process to try and expose the truth about the murder and this other convictions. And we were optimistic because of the large amount of information that had been we had gotten from the FBI by way of the Freedom of Information, the Freedom of Information Act request we had made. So with this newly discovered evidence, this new evidence that we had to corroborate everything that I had been saying all along, we went back into court, only to be met with a whole bunch of brand new racist stonewalling, and so it was shot down on every level. And right now we're in the federal level, in federal court, federal district court, and we're awaiting the outcome of that right now.
So how long do you think it'll take? You're trying to get from the federal court, what do you call it?
Well, we're trying to get relief. The relief we're asking for is that everything be thrown out, but at least we're asking for, at the least, a hearing for us to put in open court the information that we have and the information that they have. And they know that if we are granted a hearing, I don't care if we have the most racist or, most hateful judge in the world, the facts still would come out, because it's not anything I have concocted. It's the information that has come out their own files, which shows very clearly that I am innocent. First of all, the murder, that the circumstances surrounding the Los Angeles shootout are not the circumstances which are reflected on the legal documents, that they have been forged, that they are a bunch of lies, and also goes into the other convictions and allegations that were placed upon me in the 60s, and that we now know were nothing more than a bunch of tactics that were concocted by the FBI to try to neutralize me.
So how long will it be before we hear from the federal court for a hearing?
I don't know. They have months. Sometimes they take months before they even rule or make any kind of ruling. So it's just a matter of wait.
Those reports that San Quentin also destroyed a lot of files on you.
Yes, that goes into the federal suit I had filed to get out of the hole. During this process, which is in another court and it's another legal process, the Attorney General's office met with the federal magistrate who was hearing my case and tried to get him to say that there are files which indicate that I have been leading the Black Guerrilla family, that I have been involved in plots to assassinate officials. In short, that I have been involved in a lot of lies that they had made up in the past to keep me in the hole. The very things that I had attacked as being untrue. The federal magistrate blew it and got mad and told them that what they were doing were in fact in violation of federal statutes, in violation of the law, and so subsequently he found them in contempt of court for trying to bribe a federal judge. And they were found guilty. At least one of them was found guilty, and he was sentenced to do something like 30 days in parallel fine, which he later beat on appeal. So that didn't go anywhere other than to reaffirm what we had been saying all along: the dirty tricks, the unfairness, we are trying to deal within this legal framework. It goes way back to when I first entered the Black Liberation Movement. We were told you have to go about things legally. You have to do things legally, even though we're an organization, so I'm speaking of the Panthers now, who are taking militant stances against things. We have to operate within the confines of the law. So I would say that we were the most law-abiding people during that period. See? So this is why the FBI had to resort to all these lies and techniques to trick us, because we were going by, so far as the guns, we studied the Constitution, we knew that the Second Amendment of the California Constitution gave us the right to bear arms. And since all this murder, all this brutality was going on in our communities, we had to defend ourselves. So we did this, but we did it within the confines of the law. But that still didn't work. You know, we were still painted as wild, crazy gangsters who were out to cause a lot of problems. And, you know, on one hand, we were a bunch of racists who were just out to kill a bunch of all white folks, you know, and they just tried everything.
You had a program of converting black youth, it says, transferring their crimes and whatnot into political action. Did you do that? Was that part of your program too? Well,
Bunchy Carter, Apprentice Bunchy Carter, I think was a genius in doing that. He had grown up, even though he was born in Louisiana, he had grown up in the east side of Los Angeles. And at that time, they had a lot of gangs. You probably have heard of the old Slawsons, the old Farmers, the old Gladiators and whatnot. During the period of the militant 60s, there was a lot of transformation taking place throughout the country. And a lot of brothers were coming out of prison, such as Eldridge, Bunchy, Baby D. A lot of brothers returning to the community who had awakened themselves and wanted to come and share this information and to try to help resolve all these little conflicts that were going on in the black community. And they began this. This was prior to me coming to Los Angeles. After I had gotten here, and after Bunchy was assassinated, I continued that program, and it was successful because all of the gangs in Los Angeles were transformed into more of a political formations. We got them studying into black history. We got them participating into economic problems. We had quite a few brothers who were former gang members participating in economic programs that caused a lot of exploitation to be avoided. The example I had given you earlier, brothers had gotten and sisters had gotten together and was righteously feeding themselves, was righteously getting around the problem of clothing or jobs even, you know. And we had quite a few classes we had started. And after the Panthers were destroyed, if you want to use that, then you see the gangs popping up again and killing each other, or the problem, the dope popping up. During the period of the Panthers in Los Angeles, I can speak for Los Angeles, even though I worked in Chicago and New York and other areas, but I can speak more certainly about Los Angeles. The influx of dope in the black community was the lowest it had ever been in the history of drugs in Los Angeles. Now, these are statistics you're not going to hear Mayor Bradley talk. You're not going to hear on the radio. You're not going to hear these things. But we were very effective in that. The guys who were in the Panthers were former drug dealers, and you know what I'm saying? And we had communications with people who had to make their money that way. And so therefore we were able to sit down with them in their homes and discuss these problems that we had with drugs, and we didn't want this, you know, before it resulted to any kind of warfare where we would have to come and demand militantly that they stop these drugs. It had never, in my whole experience in the Black Liberation Movement, resulted to any kind of violence and convincing brothers not to keep these drugs coming in the black community. So these successes, man, they helped out a lot. That was just another thing that was very helpful. It's really pathetic, man, to hear about this PCP thing. It didn't have that in the 60s. That I didn't know about it. But it's really a shame. I see brothers coming in these prisons, youngsters, man, with 25 years to life. I mean, 17 years to life, 3 or 4 murders, and they're still spaced out. And you talk to them, and and it really hurts, you know.
You've been here, what, 10 years? 12 years?
I'm entering my 12th year this month.
So how are you holding up?
It's hard, but I'm still trying to fight this old image that the CDC and FBI painted when I first came into prison. Which is image of a violent person who commands any number of black prisoners to do anything that I would want them to do. Yeah, I even discovered after I filed my federal suit to get out of the hole that the CDC was actually disseminating manuals, and within the manuals they had me and my picture and everything in there, and had me as a leader of all kind of gangs. Now, the gangs, by me being in the hole, I was real ignorant to a lot of things. I'm only hearing things, second-hand, third-hand information. The information was not that great while doing those years in the hole. So that made it easy for the administration to make me what they wanted, because I wasn't there to refute that. I'm in the hole. I can't go anywhere. But I found, after I was able to research it more thoroughly, that the majority of these so-called gangs were created by the CDC or the FBI themselves that didn't really exist. Now, they had to do this as a prerequisite or something that they needed in order to justify their existence. In other words, if you didn't have gangs, you would have no need for a gang squad of, law enforcement agents. Okay, so when these formations began to disappear after the George Jackson was murdered, and after that whole period, all these SWAT teams, all these law enforcement formations had no reason for existence. So they had to create these things, you know. I've asked a lot of brothers, I've asked brothers on top of brothers, how did the BGF start? I have never gotten one answer from that. Everybody said, man, I don't know. I heard it from here and I heard it from there, you know. So it's a whole another situation that really should be investigated and studied by an independent group. I'm not talking about me or by no former president, by an independent group to really check into this. And I'm sure there'll be some startling, findings. Well, doing a Watts ride, I was on my way to Vietnam, and I stopped through Los Angeles to see my sister. It was in '65. And while going through certain parts of Los Angeles, I actually saw this with my own eyes. Police passing out Red Devils. Now back then, Red Devils was, you didn't have PCP, you had Red Devils a lot and heroin and stuff. I mean, he was passing them out. And since I've been in prison, I've talked to a lot of guys out of Los Angeles, and they said, man, that's not anything, So they stayed loaded during that period. And it all goes back into the old war colleges, man, of whereas agents are taught psychological warfare techniques. And that's one of the main psychological warfare techniques that they use, and that's to paint pictures that don't really exist in order to act upon those pictures to serve your own interests. See? And we are just the victims of that. We're just so ignorant to these things, so naive. We were a young political organization, and I'm not just talking about the Panthers. I'm talking about political formations through that whole era. And we hadn't studied enough. We were trying to, man. Most of the time, we'd be studying, our study classes would be raided by the police. We could have been talking about Frederick Douglass or Harriet Tubman or Jesus Christ, but it was still kicked down. So during this educational process, man, we learned a lot, but some say too late, but we did learn a lot, and I'm really anxious, man, to try to share these learnings and these findings with younger brothers and sisters so they won't fall into the same traps, because our motivation was conscientious all the way, man. And we weren't out to rob people or murder people, burglarize this, cause, we were really out to try to educate our people, to liberate ourselves from this colonial situation that we found ourselves in and still find ourselves in. And just by doing that, it goes against the interests of the capitalist class, who in turn unleashes their police forces on us. And that's where it's at.
So when you're exonerated, will you still be politically active?
Well, I've always been, ever since I became politically ignited, And I think to do otherwise would be to live the life of a lie. And I can't do that. And a lot of people come out and say, well, I've changed. I'm a born-again Christian. Belong to the Democratic Party now, or I'm this and I'm that. I don't like to play. I can't play those kind of games. I wasn't raised that way. I can't be a person who could compromise his principles like that.
So if you kept in touch with any of the other Panthers that have went through similar ordeals such as you have, such as Huey Newton and Rap Brown?
Well, yeah, consistently throughout my incarceration, I have always kept an open arm policy, or open heart policy to those brothers and sisters. It wasn't until the church committee findings investigating illegal governmental operations that exposed the truth about the FBI and the CIA's operations against the Panthers and other organizations of the 60s, that I started getting feedback from these people. Like, for instance, David Hilliard, who he and I we've always been close. During this dark period from maybe 70 to 74, 5, it was just about impossible to get any, information any dialogue going. But after these things began to come out, then people began to see. They began to criticize themselves and feel real bad that they believed the lies that the FBI had said against people such as myself. So that caused a little bit of an opening, but still there's a lot of paranoia around and a lot of suspicion. So far as Rap and I, we've always been cool. And Rap is a Sunni Muslim now. He's off into Orthodox Islam, and I heard he's doing okay. We've always tried to help. Karanga, I have a little communication with Karanga. And well, basically everyone who was a major victim of these psychological warfare tactics. We're now trying to expose the truth of this because it's happening all over again. You know, we want to try to alert our people to these things. It is not only happening to blacks; it's happening to whites too, and Mexicans.
So how are the conditions in prison now since you've been out of the hole for a little while?
Well, since I've been out of the hole, I've been able to have access to the law library. I've been able to have access to my family. I'm married again and have a baby girl. I've been able to get away from the constant pressures that you find in the hole, but you're in San Quentin, which is nothing but a big hole in itself. So it's still problems, and it's still pretty difficult to try to air these things out from this standpoint. You know.
How's the food here?
Terrible. San Quentin has the worst food in the CDC. Yeah, it's notorious for that.
What would you eat when you get out? What are you going to get?
What am I going to eat?
Yeah.
I'll go back to Louisiana, get some of Mama's good old Louisiana cooking. I'm still old Louisiana boy. Yeah, gives me some gumbo.
So are you getting current events, exposure to the media, print and broadcast?
Well, right now I'm trying to save me enough money to buy me a little radio. So I had one, but it was broken. And the papers are not coming like they used to. And I'm trying to get that back too. See, the big problem, man, throughout this is that you're fighting an organization, a conglomeration of organizations who are funded by your mamas and daddies who pay their salaries, taxpayers' money. And you're trying to expose your innocence and the truth of your convictions with pennies. And it's hard, man. It's, you know, don't nobody finance what I'm doing, you know.
So how are the guards treating you now? Is it any different?
Yes, this has been a big, pretty big change. Even though you still have quite a few guards, I call it a little racist clique that's here that refuses to accept the truth. When Warden Sumner came out and admitted that I have never been involved in gangs and I remain aloof from gangs. It was printed in the Los Angeles Times also. You had a lot of guards begin to talk to me more. They began to check into files and become more objective. And so things have changed a lot, but not as much as I would like to have seen, you know, because there's still so many problems, you know. Just about anything comes up, if my name is even sounded around it, I'm going to be jammed. You know, I'm not given the benefit of the doubt or anything. So those kind of problems still exist.
How about your relationship with the other prisoners?
Well, I've always, and I'm pretty fortunate, I've always maintained a real good relationship with not only other prisoners of African descent, but prisoners of other ethnic groupings, such as white prisoners and Mexican prisoners. And one of the things, you might not know about this, that caused Sumner, the former warden here, to look into my situation was right before being released from the hole, Amnesty International began their investigation into my case. It was in '77. They sent petitions. Okay, now those petitions were signed by every member that the CDC had of the Aryan Brotherhood and every member that the CDC had of the Mexican Mafia. And this is not counting, well, you know, the blacks were going to sign it, and, you know, they're very supportive. And so I made sure a copy went to Sumner's office because I've always stood for, you know, righteous and just principles, even in the hole. You know, if a problem occurred between white, black, the racial problems that always existed, we're always trying to resolve them and try to make prisoners understand that old technique of divide and conquer to keep you killing each other off, and basic politics of prison, man. And so as a result, I've been able to enjoy a real good relationship with prisoners.
What do you think we in the community should do to help facilitate your release? What can we do?
Well, petitions are always good. Petition in the court. Amnesty recently, last month, in October, came out with a demand that the State Department conduct an investigation into my case. It would be good if we can get more support for that demand, because the demand is already made, and it's made from an independent body, an international body. And if we could get support, nothing more than a letter saying that we support the demand or the request of Amnesty International that an independent inquiry would be conducted into these cases. That would be a great help. Congressman McCloskey, Representative McCloskey, has been working a lot. Letters to his office, to Dellum's office, to letters of support. Letters not saying that, hey, you know, people don't believe I'm guilty. People who haven't been reading into my case, they don't have to, you know, say, hey, let him out, because that would be wrong. They would just be saying things. But just if they could demand a hearing, if I could have one hearing. I have not been given not any hearing into these things since I've been convicted, and all of this information that come out has come out since then. I haven't even been given a hearing on it.